So when we talk about chord tone targeting, we're talking about actually targeting the tones that make up the chord. We define a chord as three tones, and that's going to be for G, 1 is the root, G. We go to the third note of the scale, is B, 1, 2, 3. So the third is the second note of the chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is D, that's 5, and that's the last note of the chord. 1, 3, 5 is what makes it up. Okay, so G, B, D are what make up a G chord. We go to C, just to give you a couple of examples. We won't go through all of them, but for C, I'm on a C note here, that's my root. 1, 2, 3 is E, and then G is the fifth. So you may have noticed that on mandolin, things don't always line up necessarily when you make a chord where those three naturally follow each other. In this case, I've got a C, a D, and another C. Sometimes it just happens that way. To get my my G, I have to play it down here, which it's not a chord we play too often that way. We usually play it here or open here. So don't let that throw you off. Sometimes that will happen. When we play a G chord here, we have G, D, B, so we do have them all lined up there. All right. So what we want to do is, at the top of the measure, we want to target those chord tones, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. But I want you to know that your first default, the first thing that you want to do if you don't know what to do and you see a chord progression, is lay down the chord itself. So if you see somebody play a G chord, if you can make the chord, then you're going to be good, because you can just play tones out of that chord. So I'll get Brad to just play a quick G rhythm there, and I'll show you what I mean here. So he's playing a G chord, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we call that arpeggiating, and it's not cheating, because our Star Spangled Banner, the first few notes of that, oh say can you see, is an arpeggio. So it's what music's made of, and a lot of great melodies come from that. So it's not cheating, and it's always going to be correct, 100% of the time. If you don't know what to do, lay the chord down, and the answer will be in the chord. If you played a C chord, and I can make the chord, again I can just play notes out of that chord. Somebody throws an E flat at you, if you can make the chord, even if you have to find it, I know there's D, I can make the chord, D sharp or E flat, same chord. I can even tremolo over it and do a lot of things over it. Again, 100% correct. So when a chord changes, that's when we're going to be required to play a chord tone. Most of the time they're going to change on the top of the measure, which is convenient. They don't always do that, but we're going to assume that they do for our purposes. And so if I'm playing along, say I start on a G chord, and he plays a G chord, I'm going to need to play a chord tone that goes with it. It would sound like this. Just play the chord itself, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll play the G note. It's always the easiest thing to remember is the root. If you're ever in doubt, just remember the root, okay? Now, you remember we've showed that you could play the G scale, and it works over any of those chords that belong to the key of G. Well, it does, but you're going to want to target at the top of a measure. You're going to want to target a chord tone, because it won't sound exactly the way you want it to. I'm going to have him play a G chord again, and here's what an F sharp sounds like against it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that's a G major 7. For jazz it sounds fine, but it still creates a little bit of tension there, a little bit of rub. Here's an A note, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it's a 6 note, but it's still creating this little bit of tension. What you really want to do to have what we call consonant music is to be able to play a note from the chord tone. So let me play that F sharp again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now here's G. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah, that's what we want, is to have that consonant sound of the G against the G chord. Now, watch this. Now go ahead and go into rhythm here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there I hit the F sharp, I don't know how many times, probably 6 or 7 times. But when he hit the downbeat of the G, I hit a G note, which is what I was supposed to do. And then I played that F sharp, and it doesn't bother us, because once it's a passing tone, it's okay. And that's what we did earlier when we showed you how the G scale can work against all those chords. So that shows you the importance of playing a chord tone against the chord. Now, even if you are a jazz player, you need to know what the chord tone is before you can know what the chord tone isn't. To know that this is a major 7 or it's a chord that's going to be an extension of the chord, you have to know first what the chord is and how to target that. So you also would target the third if you wanted to. So for G I have G and I have B is the third. And for example, when you go to C, Here's C. 1, 2, 3 is E, and that's the third. Okay, so let me. We're going to do a G-C-D progression, and I'll show you how to. We're going to just target chord tones, just the roots. So here's a G-C-D progression. I'm going to target the chord tones, the roots, for each time the chord changes. So for G, I play G. When he goes to C, I play C. For D, I play D. And once I hit that chord tone, I can play my G scale after that. Okay, I have the green light after that for the rest of that measure to play my G scale. So here's what it would look like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now let's target thirds. Remember, for a G, the third of a G chord is going to be B. I also have a B note here. For C, there's C, 1, 2, 3. The third is E. I also have an E here. For D, there's D, 1, 2, 3. There's F sharp is the third. I also have a third here. It's F sharp. So that's what I'll target over D. So I'm going to target thirds, and it starts to have this really colorful sound when I do this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Alright, remember there's only 3 notes in a chord. We've targeted the root, the third, now we'll target the fifth. So for G, that's going to be D. Now it starts to get confusing now, but over a G chord, the fifth is D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is G. When it goes to D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is A. So if you're to call them out as you go, it can get a little confusing because you're playing D over G and you're playing, but this is the way to work. So not quite as colorful as the thirds, but here's what it would look like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so remember, for any chord you encounter, you're going to want to target a chord tone at the top of the measure. Remember, the rest of the measure, you have the green light to play your scale. So the same thing is going to apply if we were in the key of G and we were to play an A minor chord. You need to target an A. It's the easiest thing to remember. To target the third and the fifth might not be so easy to remember. It might be a little hard to remember that C is the minor third of A. That can get a little funky, but you can always at least target the roots. You're going to do that for all the chords that you encounter. All right. Now what I want to do is play, I'm going to play our G-C-D progression again. Remember, we could play any of those chords that we talked about in the beginning of the video in the key of G, A minor, B minor, E minor, E minor, any of those. But we're just going to stay with the G-C-D for now. And I want to show you how you can mix and match the chord tones so that maybe if I'm playing over G, I play starting on the root. I'm going to target that. Then when it goes to C, I'm going to target the third. When it goes to D, I'll target the fifth. In other words, you can mix and match them. That's how your playing is going to become interesting. And you may be wondering, at really high speeds, are your heroes really targeting chord tones? And the answer is yes, because at any given time, let's say I'm playing along in G, I'm just going to randomly stop right there. Let's say it goes to a C chord next. Well, look at where I am. I'm on D here. I'm one note away from a chord tone. There's E. Go back to D here. I'm one note away from a chord tone at C. Remember, we're trying to go to a C chord here. All right, let's just go up a little bit more. Now let's say I'm going to D. Now F sharp is part of a D chord. I'm a half tone away. Go back to G, trying to get to a D chord. A is the fifth of D. So anywhere you are, you're at least you're no more than 2 half tones or a whole tone away from a chord tone. That's how you can do it very fast. That's how it can happen very quickly for you. So what we want to do is we're going to alternate these between chord tones, and so we'll play a G, C, D progression. And G will be the root, C will be the third, and D will be the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4.